Welcome to meeting number 59 of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room as well as remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please do mute yourselves when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom is at the bottom of their screen, and they do have a choice of either Floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Now, pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, November 16, 2022, the committee resumes consideration of Bill C-281, an act to amend the Department of Foreign Affairs Trade and Development Act, the Justice for Victims of Corrupt and Foreign Officials Act, the Broadcasting Act, and the Prohibiting Cluster Munitions Act. It is now my pleasure to once again welcome our officials. From the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, we have Ms. Marie-Jose Langlois, the Director General of Strategic Policy Branch. We have Mr. Jeffrey Martyr, the Executive Director of Human Rights and Indigenous Affairs. Ms. Ashlyn Milligan, the Acting Executive Director for Non-Proliferation, Disarmament and Space, as well as from the Department of Canadian Heritage, Ms. Amy Awad, the Senior Director of Marketplace and Legislative Policy. I should also add that as of 12 o'clock, we will have from the Department of National Defense, Major General Paul Prevost, the Director of Staff, Strategic Joint Staff, and he will be joining us virtually by Zoom. I will now open the floor in relation to Amendment G 1.1, which was under consideration when we last adjourned on Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. Mr. Oliphant.
I can continue then in conversation on that. I think Mr. Bergeron raised an important point to say that the standing orders are standing orders, and that what happens if we were to pass G11, we essentially nullify that section, and it then would be simply the standing orders would prevail. And I think that's precisely true. I think that he's made the point about why we're trying to do this, and I guess it still needs to be made for me an argument that this activity is somehow consequentially different than every other activity we do as a committee in terms of requesting government comment, report, etc., or any other committee does on very important work in the House of Commons. So I would be fine either way to defeat the actual clause that actually puts in these unusual requirements or accept ours. But I think he's absolutely right that indeed this is nullifying the difference, and that the standing orders are standing orders. And I think the standing orders have been, through time, have been tested by different governments, different opposition parties, have proven themselves to work. So I would think that if a case is being made that says there's an urgency about this, or there's a simplicity about it, it could be either one. It could either be it's more urgent than any other work we do, that could be made, or it could be argued it's simpler. We've heard from officials that in fact it's not simpler, that the burden to attest for these issues, the sanctions issues, are high, and we want due diligence to be done because sanctions, if they are mistaken, have life life-threatening consequences for individuals. And we want to make sure our sanctions regime, which is already strong, is robust and works. We also want to make sure that when we do put sanctions on people, they're the right people at the right time doing that. So that's why I would still support our amendment that says that the minister must table a response. It could even be sub-amended, a complete response or a robust response in accordance with the standing orders of the House of Commons or the rules of the Senate that apply to government responses to committee reports. So as I said, I'm agreeing with Mr. Bergeron that this does nullify that section, but I think it's important to nullify it either through an amendment or through defeating the clause. Thank you.
Mr. Ugenis.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be relatively brief because I think we had a lot of this discussion at the last meeting. But just to kind of reiterate, I do appreciate Mr. Oliphant's frankness in saying that yes, the intention of this government amendment is to gut this portion of the bill. And just a couple comments about why we think this section of the bill is important. Foreign policy is an area in general where the executive has and should have a wide degree of discretion, more discretion, I would argue, than in many other policy areas. And so I think we have to reflect on what some of the reasonable constraints on that discretion would be. And I think one of them is in the case of sanctions, where the government decides on sanctions. Parliament doesn't decide, the government decides on sanctions. In many countries around the world, they've tried to develop mechanisms for parliamentary committees, for groups of parliamentarians to be able to have trigger mechanisms or other kinds of mechanisms for exercising effective accountability over the government's decisions around sanctions. I think that makes sense in a parliamentary democracy to have the required discretion on the part of the executive, but to have some kinds of mechanisms. And this is a parliamentary trigger mechanism that preserves the discretion of the executive, but it allows a parliamentary committee to effectively nominate someone for sanctions, and it requires a robust response that gives reasons why the sanctions have been or have not been applied. And it requires that response regardless of prorogation or dissolution. So these are our mechanisms in terms of accountability and response that are stronger than the existing standing orders, and they make sense in a case where government has broad levels of discretion. I have a draft amendment which I would like to move if Mr. Oliphant's amendment is defeated. That draft amendment would deal with some of the sort of precision concerns around timelines, as well as around ensuring that information isn't disclosed in advance of sanctions being made that would tip people off, so to speak. I think and my amendment can be sub-amended at that point. But having a parliamentary trigger that uniquely applies in the case of a foreign affairs issue, in the case of sanctions where governments have broad discretion, I think that's consistent with what our allies have done in terms of Magnitsky sanctions. There's a congressional trigger in the United States, for example, and I think it preserves the accountability role of Parliament in an area where there is and should remain broad executive discretion. So I'm opposed to the amendment, as said. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jenis. We now go to Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that I think today we should come to this work with an idea of getting through some of the important amendments that have been brought forward. I know everybody comes with that, and so just to try to put that in the frame that we're working. I actually am going to support this amendment for the simple reason that I do believe that standing orders are in place for a reason, that there is some value in keeping the standing orders. I think that it's a reasonable thing for us to respect that. I agree with Mr. Oliphant that all committees do very, very important work. All committees have very important things that they want to bring forward, and I don't think there needs to be a different reality for this work. And I say that, knowing that I am deeply worried about our sanctions regime, and that I have brought forward a study to have this group look at the sanctions regime. I don't think it is particularly robust, the enforcement of our sanctions regime. I don't think it is working particularly well in this country. So I do have concerns about it. But that said, I think respect for the standing orders, for me, is the rationale that I will bring to this amendment.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. We now go to Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We heard testimony and had discussions with some of the leaders in the world with respect to humanitarian law, and also with respect specifically to the Magnitsky Act. And I refer to Bill Browder, Marcus Kolga, amongst others, who have said repeatedly, one, that this government has failed to put in place the Magnitsky sanctions. It's an absolute, just the reality of the numbers. I believe it's 0 in the last 5 years. They also commented strenuously that this was something that they would support. Clearly, the government is failing to put in the Magnitsky Act, and if we just rely on the quote-unquote standing orders, we know what will happen. The human rights violators around the world will continue to be able to avoid these sanctions, and even when CIMA sanctions are put in, they're not enforced. And so, if we keep going along this way, we'll just be, in fact, putting in place the definition of insanity, and we will continue to keep doing the same things while expecting different results.
Thank you. We now go to Mr. Jennis. We now go to Mr. Oliphant.
I would just add to that that we will be having a scheduling meeting, and I actually think while the Senate is doing work on sanctions, this committee should do work on sanctions as well. I think that our regime is robust, and just in defense of our government's work on sanctions, when the Magnitsky Act was passed, signed into law, concurrently, CIMA, the Special Economic Measures Act, was also strengthened. And in the practical working with our allies and like-minded countries on sanctions, the burden for us to be able to do the sanctions under CIMA is actually easier, we're finding, than Magnitsky. So that's one of the reasons we do that. However, I will concur with Ms. McPherson that this committee should take some solid time on sanctions and come up with recommendations both on their application and on their enforcement. Let's get some real data, and let's get a way of doing it. And until we do that, I would say it would be premature to do this kind of a motion, and that we can reconsider some of these issues when we do that study and make recommendations on it to the House. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Jennis.
Yeah, Chair, I am going to come back in on this just because I think some of the arguments are discordant with the realities. So there is nothing not respectful about the standing orders about passing legislation that creates a parliamentary trigger. It doesn't attempt to nullify the standing orders or deny the authority of the standing orders. It creates additional reporting obligations for the minister, and there are all kinds of places where statute creates additional reporting obligations for the minister that goes beyond what is required in the standing orders. In particular, it seeks to apply in cases where the standing orders would not apply, such as during prorogation. We welcome upcoming discussion and study on sanctions, but surely it should be apparent on face that having greater accountability to Parliament in the process of responding to recommendations around sanctions, that doing what other countries have done and having a parliamentary trigger, that is part of how we ensure effective accountability to Parliament for sanctions. And for members who believe that the sanctions regime is not operating in an optimal fashion right now, one simple way we can address that is by requiring stronger reporting to Parliament around sanctions. This doesn't preclude any of that subsequent work, but studies are times when committees can explore issues and make recommendations to governments. When we review legislation, this is where we exercise the hard power of a committee, and we could make a real difference here by adding reporting requirements that would, I think, push the government to do more in terms of sanctions, would push not just the government, but any government to do more in terms of sanctions. And these trigger mechanisms would provide greater accountability to Parliament when a future government is in place. And this is the goal of this legislation. Fundamentally, is to strengthen the democratic architecture around human rights issues, to give Parliament more tools to be informed of and respond to government decisions around sanctions and other human rights issues. And I think if this government amendment is passed, some of the folks that are members of the government today may in the future say, I wish we had this tool available to us to hold future governments to account and to encourage the use of sanctions. We could have a long discussion about CIMA versus Magnitsky sanctions, and I suspect we'll have some of that discussion in the upcoming study. But this is but to have this parliamentary trigger mechanism gives the government wide discretion to continue to choose whether they want to use CIMA or Magnitsky or not use anything in a particular case. But again, that accountability reporting measure will be strengthened by this, and that's again why it's important. And it would be disappointing to see this part of the bill gutted. And I think many of the people who follow these issues and engage on sanctions issues will be disappointed if that's the result. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. We now go to Ms. McPherson.
I just wanted to ask if Mr. Jennings could outline exactly what his amendment would do.
Sorry, just to clarify, you're wondering about my amendment, because I'm not proposing a sub-amendment. I have a subsequent amendment that
won't go forward if it passes.
Exactly. And I will not be able to move this amendment if Mr. Oliphant passes. But the draft amendment that I have, it's CPC 4. First of all, there was a concern raised about whether the existing provisions would create an obligation for the government to provide information about sanctions that have not yet been made.
Point of order. Point of order. I do believe it is out of order to discuss a potential amendment, even though which hasn't been moved.
Just on the same point of order.
What his intention is.
Yeah, just on the same point of order. I mean, we're debating whether or not to pass an amendment that would preclude the presentation of a subsequent amendment. So I think it's reasonable for folks to be aware of the alternatives. I think it's relevant to the
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Mr. Oliphant?
I think that discussion can take place, but it should take place outside the meeting. And it would mean if someone wanted to suspend the meeting for a moment and have that discussion, I think that would be appropriate. If people wanted to hear what, but I think that to keep the flow of business working, the way amendments follow from amendment to keep this order going, it would be best if it happened. And I understand Ms. McPherson's desire to know. I would like to know too, but I think we have it in our package, CPC 4.
I just want to get some of his intent.
Yeah.
And I can ask him to provide intention without asking about the.
Yeah.
Want us to suspend for 5 minutes? No?
I don't think we need to suspend. The question is one of is this relevant to the discussion? I think it's relevant to the discussion of whether or not we pass.
Absolutely, that's understood.
Okay, perfect. So my intention is first of all, the concern was raised that the line 15 says that the committee advising the committee whether or not the order or regulation is to be made. And Ms. Bendayan had pointed out, and I agreed with her reasoning that it was important not to foreshadow sanctions that are coming or not. So I'm proposing to replace that. I will propose to replace that with whether or not the order or regulation has been made, and it will continue setting out the reasons for the decision. So we're not asking the government to say we're thinking about applying this sanction in this case. We're asking the government rather to say we did sanction this person and here's why, or we didn't sanction this person and here's why. So that I think addresses an important concern that was raised during the discussion on it. The other issue is the 40-day time parameter that was proposed has been flagged as a concern by members of the government, and we certainly want to be reasonable around that. The change I'm proposing is to just eliminate the reference to 40 days. So it would be revised to read: the response must be tabled in the House or the Senate or in both houses of Parliament, as the case may be, within the time limit specified by the committee. And obviously, there's any time a committee does anything, there's some degree of consensus that's required in the process, or usually there is, and so we're talking about a case where a committee would pass a motion making this recommendation, but my amendment preserves the fact that information needs to be provided with reasons why a decision was made one way or the other, and the requirement that information be provided in the event of prorogation or dissolution. These are elements that the standing orders don't cover, and in the case of prorogation or dissolution, that the standing orders could not cover. They can only be, a parliamentary trigger like this can only be created through legislation. It could not be created by amending the standing orders, because it seeks to require information from the government in a case where the standing orders do not apply. So my amendment seeks to solve the concerns that were in good faith raised by some members of the committee, but not to use those concerns as the basis for throwing out the parliamentary trigger mechanism entirely.
Yes, Ms. McPherson.
I don't know how to ask this question.
Thank you. Mr. Oliphant.
I feel this is coming to a close, but I want to just make sure that, because there are Canadians and perhaps Venezuelans watching, to make sure that people are aware that Magnitsky sanctions have been used by the Government of Canada, and we can provide a list to the members of the committee at some point in the future. That I think that's important to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rowley. Yes, Ms. McPherson.
So I have a bit of a problem, and the problem is that I don't think either of the suggestions meet the needs of this legislation. So I think my recommendation would be, if possible, to suspend for 5 minutes, so I can ask for some clarity from one of the parties. I'm sorry to do this.
Absolutely. Suspend it for 5 minutes. So we now return to G1.1. Ready to vote? Shall it carry?
Maybe before we vote, Mr. Bergeron's, just want to make sure that we are. So let me offer some further commentary here. I was just thinking that actually I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, returning to G1.1. Shall it carry? Have a vote on division.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sarai?
Oui.
Mr. Oliphant?
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi?
Yes.
Madame Bendayan? Oui. Mr. McKay? Mr. Janice?
No.
Mr. Chong?
No.
Monsieur Deltel?
No.
Mr. Aubac?
No.
Monsieur Bergeron?
No.
Ms. McPherson?
No.
Yeas, 5, nays, 6.
Thank you. So we now go to CPC 4. Yes, Mr. Janice.
Okay, I'm now going to move CPC 4.1, which is different from the 4.4 in your package. Following discussion among the parties, I propose the following amendment. That would be to, first of all, replace line 15 on page 2 with the following, whether or not the order or regulation has been made and. So that is part A of the original CPC 4. And then I am proposing, I think the cleanest way to do this is just to read what the full revised section would be. So this is replacing part sub 2 and sub 3 of 5.1 with the following. The response must be tabled in the Senate or the House of Commons or both Houses of Parliament, as the case may be, within the timeline specified in the standing orders or rules of the Senate for responses to committee reports, and must be posted in a prominent location on the website of the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development on the day after it is tabled. And then this would be the new 3. If Parliament is prorogued before the response is tabled, the minister must post the response in a prominent location on the website of the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development within the time limit referred to in subsection 2 regarding the tabling of the response. If Parliament is prorogued or dissolved before the response is tabled, the response must be tabled as soon as feasible after the commencement of the next session of Parliament. So those are the revised sections. It substantively replaces the previous timelines, which were 40 days or another specified by the committee, with the incorporation by reference of the timelines that are used by the House or the Senate. It eliminates the requirement to post the government response during dissolution, and it instead says that the response would be tabled as soon as feasible after the commencement of the next session of Parliament in the event of a dissolution. So I think that compromise effectively achieves more or less what more or less of us want.
Mr. Oliphant.
So, generally in favor. However, as it was read, I have one question with respect to the last line, which would be the current lines 29 and 30, 31. And you said if the Parliament is prorogued or dissolved, the response must be tabled as soon after the commencement. I think that's what you said?
Yes, so that last sentence would read, if Parliament is prorogued or dissolved before the response is tabled, the response must be tabled as soon as feasible after the commencement of the next session of Parliament.
So my question is, which government would respond? The previous government? When you say the response, so a response is prepared by one government, there's an election, potentially after 2 or 3 more elections, there's a new government, which... Well, yeah, it says the response. So but the problem is we have 2 governments, and they could be very different responses. It's a new response that would be tabled by a new government, or does the old response last until, because you're saying that dissolution doesn't matter in this sentence. Right. That's my problem.
Yeah. So
I would still prefer just prorogation in that second line.
So if everyone's amenable, we should just say a response must be tabled instead of the response. I know we can retrospectively revise what my amendment was, provided that solves the problem. I don't think it's a huge
I guess
problem.
I would like to get help from either officials or legal officials, because when a parliament is dissolved, the parliament is over, people get to speak, get a new government and new parliament and new committees and new everything. So I think it's trying to dictate from the grave, as I would say. That the problem is you shouldn't dictate from the grave what is going to happen next. That's why, that committee report, if it happens in another committee, not necessarily this report, if this becomes a standard, that report could actually trigger an election. Possibly. You never know what committee could follow this same process. A committee gets a report, and it triggers an election because of what it says, and therefore the new government is supposed to report on it, when the new government might even say, we don't even want to go near there because we're a different government, and the new parliament might not want to. So I would prefer if the first part said dissolution and said prorogation, and the second part said prorogation, which to me is different than dissolution. So I have a little trouble with it.
Yeah, governments don't correspond to parliaments. So governments do not correspond to parliaments. You can have a change in government within a parliament. So many of our rules require government response. So it's not, a government doesn't have to correspond to a parliament. And it doesn't often correspond to a parliament.
What's that?
I guess my amendment's on the floor as it was proposed.
Then I would offer a sub-amendment striking the word "and dissolution" from that final sentence. That would be a sub-amendment.
Just point of order, it would be "or dissolved" would be the words you want to strike. Just to
Yes,
make sure
so
we're...
prorogation, take out "or dissolve."
Fair enough.
So we have a sub-amendment.
So do we want to vote on the sub-amendment? Is there a unanimous consent for the sub-amendment? Vote? Okay. By division on the sub-amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you're voting on the sub-amendment from Mr. Oliphant. Mr. Sarai?
Yes.
Mr. Oliphant?
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi?
Yes.
Madame Benayan? Mr. McKay? Mr. Jennings?
No.
Mr. Chong?
No.
Monsieur Deltel?
No.
Mr. Aubac? No. Monsieur Bergeron?
No.
Ms. McPherson?
Nope.
Yeas 5, nays 6.
So the sub-amendment is defeated. So we now go to the amendment. So let's put it to a vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the vote is on CPC 4 revised, point 1. So Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Oliphant.
Yes, with reluctance.
Mr. Zuberi.
Yes.
Madame Bendayan.
Oui.
Mr. McKay. Mr. Janice.
Yes.
Mr. Chong.
Yes.
Mr. Deltel.
Oui.
Mr. Aubac. Mr. Bergeron.
Oui.
And Ms. McPherson.
Oui.
11 yeas, 11 nays, 0.
Excellent.
My God, we got an
Thank
amendment
you.
then.
Still have to go to shall clause 3 carry as amended?
Yes.
Okay, so next we have to determine if clause 3 as amended shall carry. Unanimous consent? Thank you. So now we go to clause 4, and we have G2.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to
Mr.
move.
Zuberi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move Amendment G2. It's on the Broadcasting Act.
Does everyone have G2? Do you want to speak to it? Speak to it.
Sorry?
Speak to it.
Mr. Chair, this amendment's being put forth. We believe that this will make the bill better. I'd like to get a word on the scope first off on it, if you can.
In principle, we never ask that. Chair can sometimes do it differently.
First time there wasn't.
We're going to have to get a discussion. I need to have him explain his ruling. Because if he doesn't say anything, it's assumed to be in scope. So we try to get there.
Didn't that have to come from before? Didn't it have to be mentioned?
No, as soon as you move an amendment,
I should have
if he
spoken
doesn't
to
say
it.
anything,
That I just
then
continued
you
on
just keep
it.
speaking, and it's deemed.
So Clause 4 of Bill C-281 amends the Broadcasting Act to add restrictions in relations to broadcasting licenses to broadcasting undertakings subject to influence by a foreign national or entity that has committed acts or omissions that the Senate or the House of Commons has recognized as genocide, or that is the subject of an order or regulation made under Section 4 of the Justice for Victims of Corrupt Foreign Officials Act, or Section 4 of the Special Economic Measures Act. The amendment provides for a new understanding of what the term genocide is as a foreign state or a national of or a person in a foreign state that has been found to have committed genocide by a court or a tribunal as specified in the amendment. The amendment also provides for mechanisms for the Commission to determine what influence it is. These are new concepts not envisioned in the bill when it was adopted by the House at second reading. As the House of Commons Procedure and Practice states in the third edition, page 770, an amendment to a bill that was referred to committee after second reading is out of order if it is beyond the scope and principle of the bill. In the opinion of the Chair, and for the above stated reason, the amendment introduces new concepts that are beyond the scope of the bill. Therefore, I rule the amendment inadmissible. Mr. Oliphant.
Could I ask for to simply state it is beyond the scope begs the question exactly how and where it's beyond the scope. So I would like a comment from the clerk with respect to exactly where it is. So word by word, I'd like to understand this a little bit better. And it's actually confusing for me because I listened to the reason and I don't think it's really clear where the problem is.
We'll go to the legislative clerk. That because a decision has already been made, the only way you can vary that is if you challenge it. If you like, I can read it one more time.
I'm not asking the decision to be even challenged yet. I'd like to
That's
understand.
the only option available to you.
I can't ask the chair to explain his decision.
No. According to the legislative clerk, you can't do that.
So it's just, this makes no sense to me because I read it and to me it's clarifying the language. It's not overturning it. It's not reversing it. It's not undermining it. It's actually extending it and making it more specific, which I think is the purpose of an amendment. So
I think it's pretty clear. It says it provides a new understanding of what the term genocide is.
we don't change anything about genocide. We say, you know, genocide, we've added by a court or tribunal in Canada, the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, or a court or tribunal established on the authority of an international organization. It has done that. I understand that. Because that is the world's accepted understanding of how genocide is determined.
Point au règlement, Monsieur le Président. Est-ce qu'on peut entendre...
I have a point of order. Can we hear directly from the legislative clerk?
Precisely the problem. Previously, it would just be taken as fact that genocide has occurred, and now we're adding these new bodies that would determine if a genocide has occurred.
Okay. But is
Monsieur le Président,
genocide...
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order.
Monsieur le Président, est-ce qu'on peut...
Could we hear directly from the legislative clerk?
Now I see some leniency. He says if you like, yes, he will speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the bill, there is one way of recognizing genocide. It's specified in the bill that as a foreign national or an entity has committed acts or omission that the Senate or the House of Commons has recognized genocide. So it's basically Parliament, Canadian Parliament, has recognized that either a person or an entity has committed genocide. It's not necessarily based by a decision of a court, where the amendment based the definition of genocide on finding someone guilty of by a court. So that's how it goes beyond the scope of the bill.
Thank you for that explanation. I'd like to move an amendment to Clause 4. That with relation to the Broadcasting Act and to amend subsection 22(1).
Just stop for a few
Stop for a second?
Yes.
I can stop for a second.
I am considering challenging it because I am reading the definition of genocide in Canada under Canadian law, It says that genocide means an act or omission committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, an identifiable group of persons as such that at the time and in the place of commission constitutes genocide according to customary international law or conventional international law, or by virtue of it being criminal. And I would say that by harmonizing this bill with other laws in Canada, we are not going outside the scope of the bill. We are actually attempting to harmonize it because there is nothing in Canadian law that says the determination of genocide. We can make a motion in the House about genocide, but for an act to have effectiveness in the world, it needs to follow Canadian law. And right now, under Canadian law, the Parliament does not determine genocide. We actually have a set of conventions that Canada has signed, agreed to. There are international laws, and there are, we do not determine cases of genocide in the House of Commons. We opine on them. We make statements about them. That's what we do as parliamentarians. But to actually have that determination of genocide have effect in our world, Canada, as a country, successive governments, successive parliaments have said that it needs to be according to customary international law or conventional international law, or by the virtue of being criminal. Criminality in Canada, the last time I understood it, was still determined by a court of law, not by Parliament. Parliament writes laws, but we don't determine whether or not a law has been broken. That's why we have three branches of government. That's why we have an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a parliamentary branch. And so I think it's very important for us to say that this actual amendment to the law is actually in scope because it is following a harmonization of law. So as such, I would challenge the chair's ruling.
Yeah, just a point of order on that, Chair. I mean, we had arguments that were made that I think are outside of the rubric that we're supposed to be on.
There's no debate on this. If it's challenged, it just goes to...
Yeah, that was actually the point I was making, is that there's not supposed to be debate on it. But yeah, let's vote on the challenge.
Okay, so let's put it to a vote.
The vote is on the, shall the decision be sustained? Vote. Mr. Sarai.
You know, it's yes. Oh, sorry, it's a negative. No. Yes. No.
Mr. Oliphant.
No.
Mr. Zuberi.
No.
Madame Bendayan. No. Mr. McKay.
No.
Mr. Dennis.
Yes.
Mr. Chong.
Yes.
Monsieur Deltel.
Oui.
Mr. Aubac. Oui. Monsieur Bergeron.
Oui.
Ms. McPherson.
No.
Yeas 6, nays 5. So the decision is sustained.
Est-ce que je pourrais juste avoir...
Could I just have...
Might be overruled by the speaker in the House.
Je pense que Madame la greffière...
I think that the clerk can perhaps answer my question, but can we just review that vote?
5 yeas.
Yes, 6 nays.
Yes.
Yes.
Overturned.
Overturned, yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, so, but he can amend it. I think someone else has to amend it?
No.
I don't think he can.
No, just on a point of order, I do believe that what now happens, and it can be confirmed with the clerk, is that because your ruling was overturned, we now debate a G2 as an acceptable amendment. Is that
Yes,
correct?
correct.
Okay. It still may be defeated, I will tell you that, but at least now it's on the floor to be debated.
Yes, I think Mr. Zuberi indicated he wanted to amend it.
No,
or-
not
or is
yet,
that
not yet.
No, actually, let's start with this one.
Okay, sounds good. Ms. McPherson.
Thank you. I would like to add to the bill, so in 1.1, A, where it says, starts with a foreign state, I will read it out to you. I think you have it, but I will read it out. A foreign state or a national of or person in a foreign state, as those terms are defined in Section 2 of the Special Economic Measures Act, comma, that is the subject of an order or regulation made under Section 4 of that Act, or that has been found to have committed genocide by, and here is where I'm going to add, the Senate, the House of Commons, or both Houses of Parliament, comma, a court or tribunal, and then that's where we go back to, a court or tribunal in Canada, the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, or a court or tribunal established under the authority of an international organization of states. Don't get in my...
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just want to speak very strongly in support of Ms. McPherson's sub-amendment. And we heard some sort of pre-argumentation around this issue by Mr. Oliphant. So just to respond to some of that as well. Look, the process by which Canada has come to recognize genocides has been through votes of the House of Commons. And I think we place a great deal of significance in the debates and the votes around them. And the recognition of genocide entails legal obligations for us as a country under the Genocide Convention. There are many barriers and challenges that prevent cases of ongoing genocide from being adjudicated by judicial bodies. There are mechanisms by which states can interfere. There are states that may not be party to some of the courts that are referenced, and we've seen this tactic in other countries where the argument is made, well, we can't act on genocide unless genocide is recognized by a court, and a court needs to recognize the genocide. But then there isn't a court that has the tools and the capacity to recognize genocide in a particular case. So we just do nothing, and that's not acceptable to me. I don't think that should be acceptable to honourable members. I think what we need to have is a process whereby the people's representatives can make that determination, and that determination has meaning and value. The implication of Mr. Oliphant's arguments are that when the House of Commons recognizes a genocide, it's kind of just a group of people making a statement, and he's saying, yes, that's his view. That's not my view. My view is that when the people's representatives say that a genocide is happening in the world...
Could I get a copy of the... Right now we're dealing with an amendment to our amendment, a sub-amendment from the NDP, which I am liking, but I don't have it in front of me. I don't think it's been given to us in a package unless I'm missing an NDP-something. So Mr. Janice is sort of talking to our amendment, but I think we need to be talking about the sub-amendment.
No, I was speaking in favor of the sub-amendment.
Okay, I just need to have a copy of it, though, before I can actually listen to it clearly.
All right. I think I've made my point, so I'll conclude my remarks there, and if people have questions or follow-ups. But I think a recognition of genocide by the House or the Senate should mean something, and this is a way of enforcing that is a meaningful recognition, not just a group of people saying something.
That's just outrageous.
I'm reading the Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm still confused by the NDP amendment. I'm struggling to relate it to the amendment that's on the floor. So I just need some help.
For 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
Where is it?
So, friends, let's resume. So everyone has seen the sub-amendment to this amendment? Should we put the sub-amendment to a vote?
I think where we're at is that we're going to seek agreement that we stand this section of the bill again, and we move now to the clause 5 while we work out, because we don't all have responsibilities for the area which this is, which is really Canadian heritage, and we have critics involved in that that are not us. We want to take that back, and I think we are working towards a solution on getting this part cleaned up, probably even in scope. So I think, and do we move that it is, we stand?
Unanimous consent?
Do we have unanimous consent that we stand?
Yes, and we move to the next one? That's fine? Unanimous consent? Yes.
On aurait besoin du consentement unanime.
Would we need unanimous consent to go to the next point? Why would we go to the next point? To enable the government to come up with another resolution that may be within the scope of the bill, even though they challenged your decision that the one that they had was not within the scope? So I don't understand this.
Asking for unanimous consent to move to the next clause.
C'est ce que je viens de vous
That is
dire.
the
On va
will
pas.
That's what I've said. We should continue on this. We shouldn't go to the next clause. Yes, I do. The government has to live with its decision.
It seemed that was the will of the committee, and that's what was agreed to, but if you want to keep debating this, absolutely.
Clear. I think this is a point of order. Then we will continue on Clause 4 on the Broadcasting Act, and we are at the sub-amendment of the amendment.
There was a unanimous consent to move to the next clause.
There wasn't. I don't think Mr. Bergeron agreed.
Yes, exactly, so we can't do so.
No, so I'm saying that we stay at Broadcasting Act, Clause
Yes.
4, and we're on the sub-amendment to the amendment. If I seek unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment, does that then withdraw the sub-amendment, or do we need to first withdraw the sub-amendment, then withdraw the amendment, and then move towards entertaining another motion? But we will tell you we will have to keep debating that because it is not yet finalized. We are still working out wording that we can get agreement on how we essentially affix Clause 4 on the Broadcasting Act and do that. So I'm just looking for how we move this most expeditiously. We can see if we can withdraw the sub-amendment and then withdraw the amendment. But if we don't let it stand and move to cluster munitions, we're actually going to waste more time, because if we move to cluster munitions now, we may be able to get it done and give all parties time to figure out how we get an improvement to Clause 4 that is more agreeable. This is my problem. We can go back to, as Mr. Bergeron wants, go back to the Broadcasting Act. We'll have to, but then we have to deal with the sub-amendment, the amendment, and perhaps start wordsmithing an option 3. But I think some members have to go back to their spokespeople and work on this with heritage critics.
So I'm just advised that if you want to do so, you have to bring a motion that is obviously debatable. So did you wish to bring in a motion?
A motion to
move to the next clause.
Okay.
You can do so.
Without unanimous consent, I can
Yes,
do
correct.
the motion. Okay, so it's not only by UC, but I can actually do a motion.
Yes.
So then I would then move, for the sake of time and to try to be more efficient, Because I have the floor, the first thing I'm going to move,
Yes, Mr. Bergeron.
Je crois que Monsieur Oliphant
I think that Mr. Oliphant was proposing not what you suggested that he propose, and I find this very odd that the chair is suggesting a motion to a member of the committee, first. And second, Mr. Oliphant is proposing something that you didn't ask him to propose. If we withdraw the sub-amendment of the NDP unanimously, then we could do that. But I think we should first concentrate on Mr. Oliphant's idea of withdrawing the NDP sub-amendment and then the government's amendment, and then we could think about going to the next clause.
So he's not thinking of withdrawing. This is a question of whether we could just provide more time for everyone to come to an agreement as to what is acceptable, then determine that it is within scope. So it's just a question of literally moving on to the next clause for consideration.
Ce que Monsieur Oliphant est en train.
What Mr. Oliphant is suggesting, before you asked him to introduce a motion to go to the next clause, which I find odd, which was to withdraw with unanimous consent the NDP sub-amendment, and that affects the amendment that over which your ruling was challenged. So I think we should first deal with the amendment.
both the floor, and but I'll make a point of order because there's a suggestion from Mr. Bergeron that I got my amendment from you. I didn't. The reality is the law clerk suggested what would have to happen to effectively move to the next section. Because what my real goal was to not waste committee time and to move to Clause 5, Prohibiting Cluster Munitions Act, and that then means that we have 10 minutes left. We could actually maybe get something done on munitions. Because I know the reality is we're not going to get Broadcasting Act part done now because we're going to have to speak to other critics about that. So that's what that was about. I believe the clerk advised the chair. The chair then advised how that could happen without telling me what motion to make.
Si je puis me permettre, Monsieur le Président.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, what I'm trying to say to Mr. Oliphant is that if we use unanimous consent to withdraw the sub-amendment of the NDP and your amendment, then we could move to the next clause.
The problem with that is if we withdraw the sub-amendment and the amendment, then we get to the main clause, it will be further amended.
Ce n'est pas ce que je vous dis, Monsieur Oliphant.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if we withdraw the NDP sub-amendment and your amendment, then we could go to the next clause on cluster munitions. We could have unanimous consent for that.
We would need unanimous consent to do that. Either way, I'm not sure it matters whether we withdraw those the sub-amendment and amendment now or withdraw them later. They're going to, I suspect, be withdrawn.
Okay, I think we're now engaging in debate. If we could go to Ms. McPherson.
I'm not withdrawing my sub-amendment.
I know you're not.
So I don't know why that's the discussion.
I never used
In
that
fact,
term that you're withdrawing it.
If we are indeed needing to go forward, we can vote on it.
Okay, I think I have the floor then.
Yes, Mr.
From
Oliphant.
earlier. So the first thing I'm going to do with the floor is I will move that we request of the House an extension of up to 30 days for consideration of Bill C-281.
Sure.
Just a point of order, Chair. Can you confirm that it's in order to move a motion when we're debating a clause? There's a sub-amendment
sure.
on the floor.
Yeah. Is it?
Right?
Good point. Let me look into that. Do so. If there's a motion already on the floor, you can't go and.
Right.
So
the bill will need to be reported at the same time.
Point of.
I think you could move a
Point of information.
no, it's just that
But
after
can
we're
I
done
also,
with this clause, we
can I move a motion, as a point of order?
You can't move any motions. Right?
Can I move a motion that we stay this clause and move to the next clause.
You can do so. I don't think
I
you're going to
think
get the
that is
votes,
related to the clause we're on.
Point of information. Can we have unanimous? Are we allowed to have unanimous consent to move this motion?
To move past the amendment, you mean?
Informational question.
Yes, but there was no unanimous consent.
Can we? There was no unanimous consent.
So then,
There was
Mr. Oliphant
there
was
was a
supposed to
point
make a
of
motion.
there was an informational question asked by the Vice Chair around this. It wasn't that he opposed it. It's just he asked an informational question. We didn't ask for unanimous consent yet on this motion.
Yeah, just a point of order. I think process-wise, you can always propose, if you have the floor, you can propose to adjourn the discussion that's currently going on.
So I
may have a
think that is
future
a
in the
very
House Leader's
helpful
office.
point.
I always aim to be helpful.
I'm going to give a dilatory motion. Because I have the floor, I am going to move that we adjourn debate on Bill C-281 at this time. A motion to adjourn debate.
Motion to adjourn.
And so then, so people know, so then I can extend. Thank you. Sometimes it's helpful.
Yep, sure. We're going to, is there unanimous
No,
consent?
you don't, no. Just, let's call a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Sarai,
Yes.
Mr. Oliphant,
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi,
Yes.
Madame Bendayan,
Oui.
Mr. McKay, Mr. Jenis,
We'll abstain.
Mr. Chong,
Abstain.
Mr. Deltel,
Abstention.
Mr. Aubac,
Abstain.
Monsieur Bergeron,
Abstention.
Ms. McPherson,
I don't really even understand. No.
yeas 5, nays
This meeting's
1.
adjourned then.
So it's adjourned.
Debate is adjourned.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Could I now move a motion that is not related to that clause, but simply move that we,
Yes.
and I want advice from the law clerk on this. Can I do up to 30 days, or do I do 30 days? Does it have to be a definitive period of time for an extension, or can it be up to 30 days?
30 days.
30 days. So I would move that we request of the House of Commons an extension of 30 days for consideration of this bill.
Is there unanimous consent? No? Why? Okay. There isn't. Okay, you want us to
Okay,
put
a
it to
vote.
a vote? Yes.
So we are now in debate on Mr. Oliphant's motion. Okay. I would like to propose to amend the motion from 30 days to 10 days. And I'll explain why. I think we should get this bill done. And the process is that we have 60 days to look at private members' bills. And it has been 60 days. It will be 60 days on Wednesday. And for most of that time, we didn't deal with this bill. My view is this committee should prioritize legislation, and we could have had much more time to get through all of this back and forth. Unfortunately, this committee has chosen to put to the very end of that timeline consideration of this bill. And the effect of that is we are in an extreme rush now. And I think to be reasonable, I want to try to work with members and have some time for an extension. But to wait another 30 days or up to 30 days puts us in a position of delaying this important legislation, and we're in a minority parliament. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I don't want to create a situation where the bill does not pass because of delays. And so I think 10 days gives us enough time to have the conversations. But I think we we want to have the ticking clock here to make sure it actually gets done. We want to get this bill done, and a 10-day extension is enough, but not too much. So I want to see the amendment passed.
I'm afraid I have to advise you that we can only go with 30 days. It's up to 30 days, of course, but you do not have the option of varying that. And
10 days is up to 30 days. What does the standing order say, Madam Clerk?
Yes. Standing Special Order Legislative Committee to which a private member's public. Sorry, is it 97.1?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so if you refer to 97.1, it reads, a standing special or legislative committee to which a private member's public bill has been referred shall, in every case within 60 sitting days from the date of the bill's reference to the committee, either report the bill to the House with or without amendment, or present to the House a report containing a recommendation not to proceed further with the bill and giving the reasons therefore, or requesting a single extension of 30 sitting days to consider the bill and giving the reason therefore. If no bill or report is presented by the end of the 60 sitting days where no extension has been approved by the House, or by the end of the 30 sitting day extension, if approved by the House, the bill shall be deemed to have been reported without amendment. Thank you. Yes.
I would say that the motion then probably is in good order and the amendment would not be in order. However, I would say to the committee, we will, I would disagree with the member that things like the report on Ukraine, which we did take extensive time, were important. It's not as though they were unimportant things that this committee was doing, and it was even at the behest of his party that we moved on those issues. So there are things that we have done.
Sure.
So on that, I would say I think a 30-day request is reasonable. We should make an argument to the House that we need 30 more days. And the whole committee has the commitment on this side that we will do everything we can to make sure that it happens sooner than 30 days. And we have a subcommittee meeting now. We can look at our agenda. We can plan it out. And in good faith, we'll find a way to report on this as soon as possible, while giving every member the chance to make sure the bill is a good bill.
So is there a unanimous consent for that?
Sorry, Chair, just point of order. Did you rule my amendment out of order?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. So I think again it's important for us to do this quickly, and I think frankly we could still get it done by Wednesday. We would probably require extra meetings, but. You know, I just want to see this
Chair,
bill
this
pass.
is not a point of
So-
order. This is not a point of
Yeah.
order.
Okay.
Yes,
Well,
Mr. Hoback.
I've got another meeting to go to. Like, I can't sit here and.
Yeah, but we
wait
have
and
to
wait.
deal with this motion.
No, we
can't just
don't.
leave
I'm
it.
sorry. It's 1 o'clock.
Don't we
It
have to
be
deal
done.
with the motion? We could leave the motion as it.
Mr. Chair, the problem is if we don't deal with this today to get it to the House in time with the report, we may miss the opportunity.
Absolutely,
That's why I
understood.
think it's important. If we can get it done quickly, I would ask that if you would consider calling a vote, we could
Can we
defeat it
call a vote?
or pass it.
Yeah, let's call a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Oliphant.
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi.
Yes.
Madame Bendayan.
Oui.
Mr. McKay. Yes. Mr. Jennings.
No.
Mr. Chong.
No.
Mr. Deltel.
No.
Mr. Aubac. No. Mr. Bergeron.
Oui.
Ms. McPherson.
Yes.
Okay,
Yay.
so thank you very much for that. Adopted. What were the numbers? Thank you. So before we adjourn, just several housekeeping matters. Is it the will of the committee to adopt the report received by Friday, April 14th, 2023, by the subcommittee in relation to the study of the current situation in Haiti? Yes. If so, so it's been agreed that the draft report be adopted. Is it agreed that the report be entitled "The Human Rights Situation in Haiti"? Thank you. Is it agreed that the chair, clerk, and an analyst can be authorized to make such grammatical and editorial changes as necessary? Thank you. Is it agreed that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response? Thank you. Is it agreed that the dissenting or supplementary opinions be in Calibri 12-point font, left aligned, single-spaced, and be submitted electronically in both official languages to the clerk of the committee no later than 5 p.m. on April 24th?
Yes.
Thank you. And then two other things. Lastly, that the chair present that to the House. Lastly, the draft news report in relation to the recent sentencing of Vladimir Karamurza was distributed this morning to the members. Is it the will of the committee to adopt it? Yes, unanimous consent, thank you. And lastly, is it the will of the committee to adopt the proposed budget in the amount of $2,000 for the consideration of the main estimates 2023-24 that was distributed to all of you on April 17th?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Unanimous consent. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned. Now we have to go in camera for subcommittee.